I don't feel very comfortable or very safe in a place like that, especially if I'm kind of not so well to begin with. So one of the things that we've done is, first of all, everybody has a private room. Secondly, they get a key to the door, so they can lock the door. Now, we've got to be thoughtful about this. For some, that's not a thing that would work in the risk-sharing plan, but for most, it is, and it's been just fine, and people really feel respected. Begins to create more of a recovery opportunity. We always took people's clothing, property, and my God, their cell phones on an inpatient unit. And we know why we did that, but in the process of trying to manage the risk, we cut them off from their life, So it's important for people to be able to connect with their family and friends even when they're in the hospital. So we have access to the internet. It's important that people be able to get their email, pay their bills if they need to, right? And yes, things come up, the fears that we had, they're going to call their dope dealer, they're going to call their ex-wife and get all upset, What a wonderful opportunity to work through that kind of thing together, because tomorrow when you leave, it's going to happen, So can we recreate this kind of setting, this kind of locked, even secure setting, in ways that still allows people to be people? And I must say that these are the kinds of things we've learned from having peers on the team, right? So we have something that we create called a healing space. And we've put a lot of effort into trying to understand what the physical environment can do to contribute to recovery. And the way we've made it up in the past, frankly, was really wrong, because we thought we needed to strip the environment down and have it be very sterile, and we called it low stimulation and all that kind of thing. But in fact, that's not a healing space. So we want to create a hospitality experience for people. Can we make it home-like? Can we have creature comforts around? Yes, we can. So in our recovery response centers, it's very open, there's lots of light, there's warm colors, there's plants, there's art, and you can always get a snack when you want it from the refrigerator in the kitchen. To create the opportunity for people to come in and feel like they really are loved and cared for. That begins to create a hospitality experience instead of a hospital experience. This is the center that we just finished in Phoenix. You see the big open spaces, and at the top, first thing you see is welcome. Recovery Response Center. We should have a welcome sign so people feel welcome. They're greeted with a smile, open arms, right? Our Recovery Response Center, the front room and the living room in Jacksonville, North Carolina, the center that I told you we had to kind of take apart and remake. This is the center that we're about to open in Washington. Big open spaces. There's no furniture here because we're not living in it yet. But again, everybody has a private bedroom, has a bath and a shower in it. It's much like checking into a hotel. Why not? Now, some people have said, how can you manage those that need a high secure environment, those that are really presenting dangerous behavior? So I want to, if I may, indulge me, I want to read you a story or two. See if this will work. I didn't print this out, so we have to play around up here a little bit. Two recent stories, we'll see if you like this, from our Recovery Response Center in Phoenix. This morning, the television caught my eye. A few staff members were gathered around with arms folded and brows furrowed. There were lots of cops on the screen. The SWAT team, too, We recognized some of the officers from our precinct. Here was the story of an ex-Marine, heavily armed, the reporter said, who had threatened to kill himself. His girlfriend had called the police, and he warned them to stay away from the house. A young blonde woman suddenly appeared next to the reporter. She was tear-stained and shaking. You get the scene? He had lots of guns, she said, and he knows how to use them. We do have guns in the U.S. It was hard to hear the rest, and we could see that she felt unsure about describing her loved one in this condition on television. Tough place to be. Would he remember her as friend or foe? Stories on the local news about troubled people are particularly relevant at the RRC. It's like reading a preliminary medical record. More likely than not, that person would arrive at the center sometime that day. Sometimes they wound up in jail, but if the person didn't shoot himself or someone else, he would come through our back door with the very same police we saw in the TV interviews. And that would be a good thing. Many people, including myself, have spent a lot of time teaching police officers how to help people with mental illness. It has really paid off. Our guests who arrive with the cops are usually already engaged in care thanks to good police work. The officers have given them positive and hopeful messages about what a good facility they're being taken to and that staff will help them. The person is more likely to show up ready to engage in voluntary care, and that sure beats having to wrestle with people who have been intimidated and bullied right before they came to us. It was a busy morning, so I drove into my work, and the standoff on the morning news faded from my consciousness. It was a few hours later when the doorbell rang at the police entrance. I answered the door to find a few of my favorite local officers, but this drop-off was different. There were 4 more officers and 2 more police cars. As the officers provided their customary brief description of the person and their circumstances, I realized that this was the man from the morning news. He was a pretty big guy, and he looked exceptionally fit. He was vigilant, ours darting around the room, surveying his surroundings. He looked military. His eyes were reddened, and his tear-stained cheeks betrayed him. He was in big pain. "This is the place I told you about," one officer said. "It's a good place, and the people are nice. You can get help here." "You need to be there for that little boy of yours," another officer added. "My name is Mark," I said, and held out my hand. His grasp was surprisingly weak. "I won't be any trouble to you," he said, and blinked away a tear that clearly embarrassed him. He shook hands with the 2 officers and shared a hug with the lieutenant. As the officers left, I wondered if I could hug someone who had a gun pointed at me a short time earlier. I wanted to thank them, but I know that they believe they're just doing their job. I waved them away out the back door and thought about how different my life might have been had I been approached by officers like these when I couldn't tell the difference between good and evil. I turned to the military man, and he whispered, "Good people." So you see, from the very beginning, you get this. From the very beginning, we can do this differently. You know, we all want to have this kind of good people outcome, right? Can happen. How many of you work in settings like this, like where this story's from? Several? Yeah, 2 group. How do you find it, Glenn?
Those sort of incidents are very difficult.
Very difficult. Can you imagine it being different?
Yes, how to cross the gap is less easy to imagine.
Right.
I suppose one of the other challenges is that some of the things you describe haven't happened here for a very long time.
Right.
Nurses will worn clothes
Right.
for 20, 30 years, a long time.
Right.
Most places you can have a phone. That's certainly my experience.
Right.
So I think there's some things that are very different. But I think that can also lead to a certain complacency. Because I could also tell the story that they're not shared places, they're not about relationships. a lot of the language used, most people have their own rooms now. I mean, there will still be a few places where you can't, but all new wards built now, you have to have your own ensuite facilities. But that doesn't mean that a lot of those power relationships don't still exist. So I think it's kind of easy to be complacent and say, oh no, we haven't done that, we don't have glass things, let people sit. But if you think about it, yeah, that's right, and there's just those bits, so I think it's easy to feel complacent.
No, I get it. You know.
Interesting, in new place we're building, the reception areas have got glass partitions because the staff are frightened. And
Oh yeah, reception
that
areas.
kind of stuff like that.
Absolutely.
You know, but I really like the idea of things like welcome and the idea of calling guests. I think it's lovely instead of service users.
Right.
I think it's a lovely way to
Yeah.
regard something.
Right. So we try to refer to people that we serve based on the role or the setting they're in. You know, obviously, if you're in an ICU in a hospital, you're a patient, right? But we want you to be a guest and have a hospitality experience. If you're in the school or the college, we want you to be a student, you know. And if you're living in the community, we want you to be like everybody else, you know, however we would refer to anyone else with their own home and their own flat or whatever, rather than the kind of generic label.
I would just say, I think the environment is hugely important for the way that staff behave and feel they can behave. You know, because within our trust we've got our assessment wards are actually part of a large, huge district general hospital. No access to outside, you know, they're built like an old general hospital, so there's shared dormitories, and they're acute assessment wards. People come in there when they're most distressed. And I don't think it's conducive to staff feeling good about themselves. Staff don't feel valued. It's not easy to behave in a very recovery-focused way. And we've recently moved a large proportion of wards into new accommodation, haven't we? Kim works in Nottingham too. And the difference in the staff's behaviour, as well as in the whole role and their relationships, just from a place which values people, where they've got multiple sitting rooms, their own ensuite bedrooms, and so on. You know, it's massively different.
It made an absolute huge difference, doesn't it?
Same staff behaving in different ways with no additional training or anything, just to, you know, so I think give a place that staff feel valued in the same way.
Such a good point. Yeah, thank you. Do we eat together? So, you know, we fix food in the kitchen, we have a nice cook, we sit down and share a meal. This is a normal way we connect, right? I don't know how it is here.
Very varied. Some places will. I was a forensic service where they do actually all the time, but it's not.
We have recently stopped. I'm working in acute wards, and
Right.
I like to think our ward's really quite relaxed and quite calm. It's a nice environment, and then it comes to meal times and it completely changes. We regularly get memos to tell us that under no circumstances do you touch patient food. You shouldn't be in the dining room. One person to observe. I feel like there's no eating together. The only time we get to do it is if we're on nights and we initiate that we'll all get a takeaway or something. But in terms of regular meals, it doesn't happen.
That's got a history of start stealing patients' food. Stay aside. I'm serious. I disciplined someone for getting patients to cook his Christmas lunch and taking it over.
Well, you just redefine it as it's not stealing.
No, absolutely.
I get it. I mean, I get it.
I think it's what you do from an organizational perspective. As senior managers, we need to change that culture from the above as well. On the ground floor, we want to make a lot of changes. But like you're saying, if your member staff is eating with somebody, you don't know how to do that. How can it be recovery focused? There's a lot of mindset that needs changing altogether. And collectively, it can happen.
It can happen, and it really goes to the values. And in a recovery environment, in a recovery healing space, we have partnerships with people. We break down the barriers in the attitude, in the physical space, in what we do, so that we're together instead of having kind of an us and them, expert-patient relationships.
The other thing that you might be worth pointing out here, and I've written about it, is toilets.
Yeah.
More floors, acute wards still have separate staff and patient toilets.
The only place that I see a staff restroom sign is in my office, where I confiscated it. But you're right. We're going to catch schizophrenia, you know.
No, they don't have the same standards of hygiene as we do.
The partnerships also need to be created in how we document our work. So our electronic record that we call the recovery journey is a shared process. So we sit down with the guest, we're both looking at the computer screen, and together we make the entries into the record, side by side. Again, to communicate the idea that we're in this partnership. In fact, sometimes if they want to type because I'm not so good, that's fine too. You know, they can make the entry themselves. It's not just going to be writing down what they say or their words, because it is a partnership. We're going to contribute that together to help them think beyond perhaps what's in their mind immediately or what's coming out of their mouth, but together we create this journal of what's happening and this plan together.
I really like that top statement, this building is strong enough to hold my big feelings.
Yeah, that's what he said.
A huge amount.
That's what he said. And then the next one, this space feels easy. You know, it should be both of those things, right? We redid one of the centers in Washington State where we took over as the adult provider, and this woman came in and said this, you know, this place feels good to me now. I used to get depressed when I came here. Again, the environment. So what's helped us get there is what you're doing and creating in such a wonderful way here now in England is a critical mass of peers on the team. As Jeff was saying, this is the most powerful tool we really have to transform these things we're talking about. We say a minimum of 25%. Now, these are not just people with a lived mental health experience. These are people working, providing peer support, which is different. We know it's different. I didn't start to create this kind of transformation in our own workforce in 2000, but it just continued to gain momentum more and more. And we got more opportunities to build more peer-run services and more peer posts and positions. So today, 62% of our workforce are peers. We don't so much even think about it that way. We're just all working on recovery.